Hello, I'm Amy Thorn, CEO of the DBM Association, and I want to welcome you to this year's SCLA.
I want to welcome you live. Here we are. This is the official welcome, the official kickoff. I am so psyched. Did we have a great day? And we have all of our wonderful virtual attendees joining us online. So we want you to be interactive, have a great experience. We're so glad to have you. We have people joining us from all over the world. That's the power of the SCLA. When you have global companies and global brands, not everyone can still get in a flight and be here in person. But for those of you who showed up, thank you, because in person is great. And those of you that are there virtually, we would love to have you here in person next year. And wow, do we have a kickoff today. We have got a power-packed program. So many top executives have come together to bring you key insights, takeaways, nuggets that are going to enrich your life, not just professionally, but personally. And that's what your peer groups are going to do. How many people had a great peer group? Oh, yeah. Was that fun? Right? And how about to boldly go, exploring iconic leadership styles? What did we find out? Apparently, in supply chain, we're all either Captain Kirks or Spocks. Quite a lot, right? Great teams. Kirk and Spock made the best team because they balanced each other out. And that's what we do in supply chain as a discipline. We don't just balance out the teams. You bring the strength, the power, and you are the engine of the world, each and every one of you, and you've worked so hard for so long. So for the next couple of days, I really want you to lay back, relax, interact, but most importantly, have fun. Make new friends. That's what we're all about. We purposefully keep the SCLA small, only 50 company members and all non-competitive. So don't be afraid to share what's keeping you up at night, to share how am I going to solve these top problems? Because the people that are going to help you solve it, the lifelines that you need are right here in this room. So take advantage of that. We have a spectacular program, and I am so excited about our keynote speaker who's going to be coming up here in just a couple of minutes. And there's a lot of work and a lot of vetting that goes in to determine who is going to be in front of this audience. We take it very seriously. So this year, because we have been through so much and we've struggled and we've had a lot of roadblocks and unwanted change in our lives over the last couple of years. Is that not true? Since COVID hit, how many people wanted COVID? How many people wanted all this change that we're getting? How many people wanted all this hard work, right? We had to learn to adapt and become agile and become resilient. And it wasn't just our supply chains. That was us as people in our personal lives. We had to rebalance what work and life looked like. So we're going to be exploring all of these options. But I'll tell you, Beau, in a couple of minutes, is going to talk from the podium about how you can change the way you're thinking and be a better leader. But most importantly, just be better and feel better about yourself, your decisions, your interactions, and who we all are together. So I did want to make one comment for our virtual audience. Please participate in the app. That is your chance. Ask questions during the chat. The speakers will see everyone's chat questions up here on stage. So whether you're in person or you're virtual, you want to make sure that you're posing those questions in the chat feature. We want lots of questions today because that's your chance to interact. And it's super easy for our virtual audience. You'll see it, just hit the chat button and you'll be posted right away. And we really want to see you engage. So get a lot out of it. We're so glad to have you join us. We have a competition going, so I don't know if we have the leaderboard. I don't want to cheat Beau's time, but we'll get into that in a little bit. But if you haven't been participating, if you haven't been taking the polls, if you hadn't been posting to the social wall, looking at the pitch tanks, visiting our educational resource members, start doing it. You'll get great points. And we're going to go over some of the fantastic prizes. And this television right in front of me is going to be one of the grand prizes. So if you want it, we'll ship it to you. Someone's going to go away. Big screen TV. But anyway, I want to thank the women in this room and the men in this room. that are part of the executive committee. Because if people know the engine, there's a slug in the engine, and these were the power behind this. So if you're an executive committee member, would you please stand up so we can acknowledge you? We are so grateful. You did all that heavy lifting, and I want everybody up. Look around. Yeah. Turn around, let everyone see you really well. Thank these people. Make it a point today to thank those that you saw, because they've done so much for the SCLA, not just contributing their time and their effort, they've recommended other companies. So if you too know a great company that you think might be a good member, or you know a super awesome executive that you think would benefit from this, let us know. That's how we grow. But there's chairs of this event, so that takes a much higher level of dedication to become executive committee chair. You have to be involved in the organization, in the education committee, and we have coming up on stage right now this year's chair, Todd Steffen. So excited to have him. He is the Senior VP of Supply Chain and Logistics for Colliers. He's also this year's Distinguished Service Award winner. And if you haven't had a chance to meet Todd, where have you been? He has got one of the most charismatic personalities. He has a brilliant mind, and you can see that brilliance just sparkle through the event. Todd, thank you so much.
Learned from him that reality is questionable. Anyways, just wanted to give a sincere appreciation to everybody who contributed to the program contents. Special thank you to Marcus Olsen, our education chair, and of course to Lori and to Amy for all their support, their dedication, their leadership throughout the year that they give our group. So please acknowledge them. I look forward to meeting everybody. As Amy suggested, I would love to meet everybody and really enjoy, interacting and engaging with folks. At Colliers, my role is to really work with global occupiers, global clients that are trying to achieve resilience by establishing the appropriate North American industrial capacity that they need to run their business. So I handle everything from site selection to capacity planning to buying and selling and leasing industrial capacity for companies. I focus on the food and beverage sector. However, I deal with all sorts of companies that need industrial capacity. In addition, over the past 20 years, a personal and professional passion of mine has been to help companies learn how to staff their operations with people with disabilities who operate with the same pay and performance expectations, but achieve higher levels of safety, attendance, retention, and engagement levels in those industrial settings, and when you compare with typically able populations. And it's been extremely rewarding. I've been witness to about 10,000 people with disabilities that have successfully gained and maintained employment in some of the largest industrial settings in the country. So if you haven't kind of thought of that from a staffing standpoint, please talk to me about that. That's something I'm very interested in. I'm thrilled to be here in person, as Amy said. This is super exciting to see this many people come together. There's got to be close to record attendance, for one of these events. And I know Marcus is going to kind of go through the program theme, so I'm not going to cover that. But I did just want to share with you why I think, the nature of the SCLA is so unique and special. It's really, I've been on a number of supply chain leadership groups throughout my career. And I think what makes the SCLA thrive and continue to succeed and grow is the fact that it brings together professionals from the industry, thought leaders from the industry that are very passionate and that are very proactive. And they bring content from their experiences together in a personal setting. And what I like about it is the content's brought by the members and it's brought for the benefit of the members. I think it's a very unique setting, and please take advantage of it. I think you get out of the program and the sessions what you put into them with your time and attention, so please engage. I think everybody by Thursday will be walking away with some great new insights and some phenomenal new resources in the people in this room that you could tap into, as Amy said, as your year progresses. So with no further comments from me, I'm going to turn it over to Marcus. Marcus is going to walk us through the kind of the program themes that we'll be experiencing for the next couple days. But again, welcome to everybody. Really appreciate you being here.
Wow, thank you very much, Amy and Todd. It's hard to follow that up. I was sitting at my table trying to think of a good icebreaker topic that I could bring up. And there's so many topics that we can talk about, that we're going to be talking about over the course of the next 2 days. Anything from political problems, geopolitics, all of the logistics issues associated with that. But I thought that nothing really breaks the ice like global warming. Anyway, no, seriously, I would be, and thank you for laughing, I appreciate that. We have a fantastic program coming up. Yesterday was a great start. Thanks to the Supply Chain Women in Action for making that happen. But I'd be remiss, before I go to the program elements that we're going to be discussing, if I didn't recognize the Education Committee. So if you are an Education Committee member, including you, Nick, and you have one of these green ribbons, please stand up. Certainly, if you have a chance, and I'll echo the theme that Amy and Todd just exhibited. If you have a chance to thank an Education Committee member, please do so. Without them, then we wouldn't have a program to talk about. So they have really done all of the heavy lifting, along with the various members of the teams that have put the panels together and put the program together. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. So without further ado, let's talk a little bit about the program. So the art of resiliency, the new reality. We're going to be talking a little bit in the keynote about what reality actually means and what it doesn't mean, and how that might apply to what we're doing in our roles in the supply chain. Later on today, we're going to be covering a wide variety of topics. If you want to make sure you take the time to review what it is we're doing, just look in this magazine or look on your app on your phone, and that'll tell you exactly where you are, where you should be. Topics of the day include organizational topics such as retaining and developing talent in this kind of new reality that we're in. Change management. We are all in the business of change management, and so if we don't talk about how to do that effectively and efficiently, then then we're probably not doing our jobs very well. So there'll be some opportunities to engage on change management. Logistics, insourcing, and outsourcing. As a purchasing professional, the outsourcing of logistics is always near and dear to my heart. But inventory management, and then finally managing decision rights in organizations. Very important topics as we enter into our kind of new age of business post-COVID. Some of the rules might be changing about how we make decisions. So I encourage you to take advantage of all of those sessions, participate, ask questions, take notes. But there's more to the program than just that. We have the peer groups that you can take advantage of, and all of the people in this room who you can network with and ask questions of, get to know better, and maybe someday down the road they'll help you to solve a problem that you have in your organization. So I could go on and on, but I won't. So Todd, if you want to come back, Todd is going to introduce our keynote speaker. But thank you very much, and I hope you get the most you can out of this event this year.
All right, now the exciting part. I have the pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker, and I talked before about how SCLA is a really unique and special place. I think this keynote speaker especially is a great example of what makes the SCLA so special. I'm going to invite you to open your minds today. And given that we're inviting a neuroscientist to the stage, I think that feels like a safe request. Dr. Beau Lotto is going to challenge our way of thinking. He's going to teach us to value deviation through our discussion here, and then he has a book titled Deviate. Not to give it away, but and really deviate from the norm through exploring ideas such as knowing less to allow us to understand more, and understanding that everybody, like it or not, has assumptions, and there's a value in knowing those assumptions. He'll teach us how to learn to ask the right questions as opposed to feel like you always have to have the right answer. And I think most importantly, he's going to challenge us to rewire our brains so that we embrace uncertainty to achieve agility and resilience, which is really the theme of the conference and what we're here for. So please help me welcome Dr. Beau Lotto. Enjoy.
So how many of you think you see the world as it really is? No one? How did you get here if you're not seeing the world accurately? Well, we're going to find out if you do. All right? So thank you for the invitation. Can we have the first slide going up there? The challenge. So so I have you for about an hour, by the way. Okay? Is that better for the feedback? So what's the challenge? In fact, this is the fundamental challenge that all brains face, which is that the world changes. And it doesn't just change simply, right? The world is increasingly changing unpredictably. Think that in 2010, the top in-demand jobs didn't even exist in 2004, right? And that was 13 years ago. We are educating young people for a world that doesn't yet even exist. And what's more, the world is changing in an increasingly nonlinear way. And the reason is because life is a complex system. Life is not just diverse, it's also integrated. So the metaphorical butterfly that flaps its wings over there affects us immediately. Right? And because the world is increasingly connected. Over 50% of the people are actually around the world are connected by the internet. So what happens in nature with a complex system is you can add a small change and you get a massive nonlinear impact. Okay, so here we're having the weight of a skier, right? If you're from Phoenix, this is snow. Okay? And the whole thing gives way. Now you're all wondering, did he survive? Right? And I'll leave you with that question. We'll come to that, right? Because the future is increasingly unknown. This is just biology. This is just physics, which means it's actually impossible to make a good decision. Right? Your life depends on, your business depends on making good decisions, but you can't make them. It's literally impossible. You have no idea the decision you make now will be a good decision in the future. You can make a reasoned decision, but you have no idea if it's going to be a good decision. Good decisions are actually historical. And supply chains are also a complex systems. They're massively diverse and highly integrated, which means you are experiencing increasing amount of change, and that change is going to be increasingly nonlinear and increasingly unpredictable. You have all kinds of changes. The sources are changing. The regulations are changing. Even people's expectation of where the things come from. They want to know where it comes from is changing. So your brain cannot predict. Now, your brain actually, ironically, did not evolve to predict. That might seem completely counter to what you might be thinking. Your brain evolved to do something else. It evolved to respond. And COVID made this, what is always implicit, explicit. So what's the question then that I want to address in the next 50 minutes? Which is that you're actually in the business of reliability. Making sure things work. But how can you be reliable in a future that doesn't yet exist? I mean, it seems impossible. So what's the answer? The answer is that adapting is not enough. It's not enough just to change with change. You have to do something more. Because how you adapt matters. Adapting you get for free. Your brain evolved to adapt. You're adapted to adapt. You're evolved to evolve. You get that for free. The question is not whether or not you adapt. The question is whether you have agency in how you adapt. How you adapt matters. So the definition of resilience in the American Psychology Association is not simply about standing still and withstanding all these changes. It's about adapting well in uncertainty, adapting well when at times that matter. That's resilience. Because those who respond better do better. Not necessarily those who predict, it's those who responded better. And by better, that means responding faster. You can have two systems that adapt. The one that adapts faster is going to outcompete the one that adapts slower, even if it comes to a great solution. So you have to respond better in order to do better. If you want to do better, you actually have to be better. So my take-home message is that this is all about you as a way of being. Because a lack of resilience, the ability to adapt well, is one of the key reasons why organizations and people fail. Examples of people failing are, you'll know these examples. Xerox, Kodak, Nokia, right? These are all organizations that did not respond well to the change. In fact, you're of course familiar that Kodak actually created the very change that it couldn't adapt to. They selected themselves out because they were too rigid. So resilience requires being able to anticipate. Anticipation is not the same thing as prediction. Okay? Yesterday, the day before, I was just in Seattle. I live in England, but my mom lives in Seattle. She has Parkinson's. She's 88 years old. She has Parkinson's. And I was watching her physiotherapist help her in her training. He does not train her how to walk. He's standing there, and he's pushing her. Right? He's pushing an 88-year-old woman with Parkinson's disease. Right? The reason I asked him, what are you doing? Not like because I thought he was doing something wrong. I wanted to truly understand what was going on here. And the reason is because he wants to have her brain prepared for the moment that she's out of balance. Because that moment will come, inevitably. He wants her body to be able to anticipate. Be able to be agile, to respond quickly. Right? It's one of the reasons why many of you might do yoga or stretch, because you're making your body agile in preparation for the uncertainty that is inevitably going to come. And to be in a dynamic equilibrium, your brain did not evolve to be absolute. It's constantly changing. It's constantly redefining normality, right? It's constantly dynamic in its balance. I'll give you an example. So I don't know if we can switch off these lights, turn them down, but if not, it's all right. I want you to first notice you have these two desert scenes. One is just the flipping of the other, the same color. What I want you to do now is I want you to stare at the dot between the red and the green. Don't look anywhere else. Your brain is going to redefine normality. Okay? Don't look anywhere else. Your brain is learning that the left side of its visual field is under green light and the right side is under red light. That's becoming its new reality, its new normal, its new balance. You're also getting very sleepy. Keep looking. Don't look anywhere else. When I tell you to, I'm going to ask you to look at the dot between the desert scenes. 3, 2, 1. Look at the dot between the desert. Do they still look the same? No? The one on the left will look reddish, the one on the right will look greenish, except for 7% of the men who are colorblind. You might not have known that because you conflate red and green. And now as you look around, your brain will again redefine normality, right? Your brain is constantly redefining normality. And finally, resilience requires agency. If you're going to adapt well, you have to have agency in how you adapt. So how do you adapt well? How do you have that agency? It's by, in fact, one of my primary aims in this presentation is I want you to know less at the end than you think you know now, okay? But understand more. Because to know something is efficient, right? To know a recipe does not make you a chef. You can cook, but you're not a chef. If the basil's missing, a sous chef doesn't know why it was there. They, oh, well, we can't cook now. But a chef knows why it was there. Maybe it was about contrast or something else. So the chef is able to adapt because he or she understands, doesn't just know. To know what someone did, to know what your children did, to know what your partner did, does not mean you understand why they did it. What people want to feel is understood. To understand someone is to know why they do something, not simply what they did. To know where you can get stuff doesn't mean you understand supply chain, right? It's not enough. You have to understand the system. Knowing is not a bad idea. It's efficient. But so often we focus on efficiency, short-term efficiency in particular. Understanding is actually creative. Now, innovation is actually the balance between efficiency and creativity. You need both if you want to innovate. Effectively, creativity is long-term efficiency. It opens up, it creates possibility. It expands your search space when you understand something, which enables you to ask better questions. Ask terrible questions. Because they know what they're not supposed to ask. Whereas people who are naive ask brilliant questions because they don't know what they're not supposed to ask. Similarly with people who understand, it opens up the search space, creates the possibility for asking questions. And innovation begins with questions. Understanding begins with a question. It doesn't begin with an answer, right? Understanding is actually a systematic process that begins with a question. We begin with knowing, right? The first step from knowing is doubt. Is to say, I wonder if this could be different. The second step is to then deviate away from what you're doing. The next step is to diversify. Now, you could diversify in your teams, you could diversify in your mind, you can diversify in your experience and technology. You're searching the search space. And then you distill. What you're distilling is a principle that transcends context. Your brain is constantly looking for a principle. E equals MC squared is a principle. It doesn't care if you're a chicken, a bowling ball, or a planet. Okay? So you're looking for that principle. And then you decide which one you're going to do, and then you dare to act. You actually have to bring it into the world. When you bring it into the world, that's where you truly get understanding. So creativity is not this messy, serendipitous process. Creativity is actually a very logical process. But there are some fundamental barriers to it. What's more, understanding fulfills one of our greatest needs. Now, what is one of our greatest needs? Instead of telling you, I want to show you, I want you to feel what your greatest need is, which means I need you to all stand up. Now, we're all going to conduct a piece of music together. Now, you all know this song, this piece of music. Now, I'm a crap conductor, so if I can do this, so can you. Okay, we'll want this up loud. Are you ready for this? Ready? All right. Come on, conduct. You can feel where it's going. Louder. Feel it coming? Ready? Oh, what is our greatest need? We need closure, right? You can sit down, right? Before Mozart would go to sleep, he'd go to the piano and go da-da-da-da-da. He'd play the chord, miss the final note. His father was already in bed. Say, oh, God, he'd have to get up and hit the final note before he'd go to bed, right? It's why Game of Thrones is popular, right? Because they know you need closure. As soon as they give you closure, the show's over. So they finish every episode on a minor chord, right? We need closure. It's one of our brain's greatest needs. Understanding is that closure, that temporary closure. And we're not the only ones, right? So I want to go to this one. We're not the, okay, first of all, I want you to notice when you feel that closure, you feel it in your body.
A little something like
DJs use this all the time. They ramp up the beat, and then they do what's called drop the beat. Feel what happens. And like I said, we're not the only ones. We all love closure. The moment of certainty. I love the guy on the left. Right? Not all of us get it. Okay? But what's the problem? We need closure, we need understanding to get that resilience, right? We need to be agile and remember that moment, the first step to get to understanding is the first step that most people miss. People will tell you how to diversify. People will tell you maybe even how to get principles. But almost everybody ignores the very first step that even gets you there. If you don't take that first step, you're not going to actually follow the rest of that path. Right? And often people miss that first step on purpose because that first step is hard. It's incredibly hard. Right? And what is that first step? Well, the first step from A to B is not B. Your first step from A to B is from A to not A. To let go of what you thought to be true before. Right? Your first step to understanding is doubt. And we hate doubt. Right? The first step to understanding is a question. It's not an answer. Design thinking will say, well, let's start with a problem, then they'll iterate to create a solution. I say, that's great, but what if your problem doesn't matter? Who cares what your solution is? True innovation begins with a question, and asking a brilliant question is hard. It's very hard, because it requires not knowing. So I want us to do a test. You have some paper and pen in front of you. We're just going to do a test. This is all for yourself. This is just for yourself. You keep it private. Okay? We're going to go through a series of questions, and I'll tell you the significance of this test in a moment. And I'll read it out for you. Okay? And then you answer the question. Now, if you strongly disagree with an answer, with the question, or what it feels like, it's a -2. If you strongly agree, it's a +2. Okay? Typically, I can let go of regrets and feelings of dissatisfaction about the past. If you strongly disagree with that, that's a -2. If you strongly agree, it's a +2 and everything in between. Typically, I can enjoy pleasant experiences without needing them to last forever. Agree, disagree. Typically, I can view problems that enter my life as things to work on, rather than reasons for becoming disheartened or demoralized. Agree, disagree, strongly or weakly. Typically, I can enjoy my family and friends without feeling I need to hang on to them. Typically, I can take joy in others' achievements without feeling envious. Typically, I do not get hung up on wanting an ideal or perfect life. And finally, typically, I am fine moving on to what comes next when present. Now what I want to do is you add up each column, and then you add up all those numbers together to get one number. Of course, if it's a negative, you're subtracting. If it's positive, you're adding. Okay? And then take note of your overall score. This is just for you, right? This is only for you. What are we talking about here? We're talking about the power of letting go. This is one of the tests for wisdom. Now, at the top is the percentile, right? From 0.1 up to 99. And the score is down below. So if you're -2 or lower, you're low on this ability of letting go. It doesn't make you bad. It's just giving you awareness. If you're 10 or higher, you're very high on this ability, right? If you're 2, 4, 6, you're in the middle. So what is this ability? It's a measurement of non-attachment. And the skill of non-attachment creates greater emotional stability and less ruminating thinking, which can perpetuate depression. It indicates a reduction in self-focus and a more flexible self-concept. You define yourself loosely. You're able to adapt your identity, which reduces the self-bias that can limit development wisdom, right? It indicates a higher stages of psychological growth. Letting go is one of the key aspects of agility, of resilience. But why is letting go a problem? And the reason why it's a problem is that we hate not knowing. We evolved to hate to not know. Because, during evolution, we hated uncertainty, right? Everything you do, almost everything you do, is an attempt to retain certainty, to decrease uncertainty. I mean, it's the reason why Uber is successful. Uber is not successful because they help you get a taxi easier, faster. It's because they tell you when the taxi is going to arrive. They decrease uncertainty. The problem is we hate it so much that when we face change, usually our first response is to stand still. In fact, we fight to stand still. We strive to stand still. And yet in life, movement is life. Things that are stand still literally get selected out. And I call this the certainty trap, the desire to actually stand still. And again, the reason is because during evolution, dying was easy, right? There are lots of ways of dying. If you weren't sure that was a predator, it was too late, right? We evolved to take what is uncertain and make it certain, right? If you're in your little village, you've got your house, you've got your food, what a stupid idea to go see what's on the other side of that hill, right? You would have literally increased your chance of dying. Well, we see the world through our evolved ancestors. Life didn't begin with you. You're seeing them through their experience. So when you experience uncertainty, your cortisol levels increase. Because for your evolutionary ancestors, you were increasing the experience of potential moment of death. So your cortisol levels increase, your immune system starts degrading, your brain cells start dying, both of which not a good idea during a pandemic. Okay? You actually become a simpler and more extreme person. If you're liberal, you become more liberal. If you're conservative, you become more conservative. It's one of the reasons why we're experiencing so much polarization right now, because people are going to an extreme version of familiarity in order to stand still. We ignore complexity for simplicity. And you even become blind to the obvious. You'll start seeing patterns where no pattern exists because your brain is trying to get certain. So you'll make it up. Here's an example. This happened in Australia. I was actually just in Australia 2 weeks ago. This guy goes in, he hands the teller a note to rob the bank. The bank shuts down. He's trapped. He's trapped in tremendous uncertainty. His space of possibility is reduced to a single dimension. Right? What is the assumption that his brain is missing? That door's pull as well as push. It was never locked. He never thought to pull it. Right? He was caught 5 minutes later. How many of you have been in this kind of situation, right? You have. You've robbed a bank. And you're here to tell the story. Talk to him later, right? We will find patterns where no patterns exist. It's called the disempowered brain. When you feel you have no agency in times of uncertainty, you'll again see patterns where no pattern exists. And those patterns will confirm what you expect to be true already. You will confirm your expectations. Even your eye movements are looking for the things that say, yeah, I knew I was right. Okay? Because you perceive what you expect to perceive. Here's an example. I'm going to give you two expectations. You can either expect brainstorm or you can expect green needle. Okay? The sound string never changes. What's going to change is your expectation. So I want you to expect brainstorm and then switch your expectations and expect green needle. And what you hear will change. Ready? Try to hear brainstorm. Now try to hear green needle. How many can hear both? Now try to hear brain needle. You're just hearing your expectations. The sound never changes. We can listen this forever. Right? Some of us do. Okay. And what's more, when it comes to conflict, we either avoid them altogether or we ignore the ones that don't fit our ideas, our sense of self, our belief in colleagues, right? We'll engage in conflicts that confirm what we think to be true already anyway. Okay? Because we focus on what we already know. The certainty trap. Notice that the fundamental assumption of the certainty trap is that what worked yesterday will continue to work tomorrow. Right? Often that's true. If you live in Aberdeen in northeast Scotland, I did my PhD in Scotland, right? There was an artificial intelligence system way back when, right? And it was able to predict the weather, which is a complex system, 80% of the time. Almost no weather system can do that. So they went and explored the algorithm. What was the rule that the algorithm was using? The weather tomorrow will be the same as the weather today. Now, if you're in Scotland, that's true, right? And not necessarily nicely true, okay? So what's the solution? How do we overcome the certainty trap, right? How do we actually take agency in our adaptability? How do we, therefore, become resilient? And the one answer, if not the answer I want to suggest, is that you come to understand your brain's innate capacities. You already have the skills to change. You already are doing these skills. It's just that you're not necessarily applying them in the most positive way. Maybe yes, maybe no. That's not for me to decide. But only through that understanding do you have the possibility of having agency. You don't have a choice until you know you have one. So what are those innate capacities to change that give you both agency but also hope? Which is an essential thing that provides your brain the ability to step forward. And this is fundamental because there's a recent study, and it's so obvious and yet so true, that those who know, who are certain that they can't change, or decide that they don't want to change, will not actually try to change. As a consequence, they won't change, confirming their belief that they know that they can't change or that they shouldn't try to change. It's a vicious circle. Whereas those who understand they can change and understand how to change will at least try. So what I want you to do is give you some understanding about how your brain can change so you can take agency over that. The first one is that, we're going to come to the culture in a moment, that first, that your brain, that your change is possible. It is literally possible to change your brain. And this is because your brain is plastic. Your brain evolved to evolve, it's adapted to adapt. Your brain evolved to continually redefine normality, to continually find that new set point. I always say to people that when you step into an environment, make sure it's an environment that you want to be in, because if it isn't, your brain will eventually come to see it as normal. You will adapt to the environment that you create, called niche construction, because your brain evolved to match the complexity of its world. A more complex world, a more complex brain. And so in my PhD, we actually studied neuroplasticity. And your brain is actually, it grows according to these what are called neurotrophic factors. And these molecules are released according to how active your brain is. The more active your brain, the more these molecules, it's like fertilizer, it's like food. The more active it is, the more food it creates. The less active it is, the less food it creates. Okay? So I used to grow brain cells in a dish. And I used to apply these molecules to see how we could facilitate brain growth. And then my mentor at Berkeley, many, 30-some years ago, Marion Diamond, wonderful person. She was the first person to actually study what happens in the brain when we put rats or mammals or humans in different enriched environments. So here we have two brain cells from the cortex, where we and they do our thinking. And you can see the one on the left comes from a brain cell, from a brain that was in a deprived environment. It's atrophy. Very little social interaction, very few activities. Whereas the one on the right comes from a brain cell in an enriched environment. Lots of social interaction, lots of toys, lots of playing, right? Your brain evolved to match the complexity of this world. Why? Because 20% of the energy you just consumed at breakfast goes to 2% of your body mass. Thinking is expensive, which is why so few people do it. Right? It's really, literally expensive. It's the most expensive organ in your body, disproportionately so. And to think differently means you're actually growing new tissue. It's incredibly expensive. Far better to not think, to continue to do what you know. You literally conserve energy. And yet, complex brains are more interconnected. So they're more resilient, they're more adaptable. They're also healthier. Which means that to change well requires curiosity. The desire to step forward into an enriched environment, into a new environment. Travel is a wonderful example. But you can travel in your mind with ideas, with books, or to another culture, or to a different environment. Number two, a culture or a person that understands it can also influence change. So change, you can change, and what's more, you can influence it. And you influence it by activating your prefrontal cortex. Okay, the prefrontal cortex sits in the front of your brain. Okay? It's the most recent evolved innovation of your brain. Humans have incredibly large prefrontal cortex compared to almost every other animal on the planet, except for maybe dolphins and whales. Okay? And what is the prefrontal cortex? So you have the limbic part of your brain, which is that fight or flight, the emotional response, like, shit, I gotta get out of here. And then you have the prefrontal cortex is like, no, let's think about this. Let's be calm. Okay? It's responsible for, morality, intuition, empathy, insight. But what your prefrontal cortex is really doing is helping you to attend, but not what to attend to, but what to look away from. Attention is not what you look at. I already know what you're all looking at. You tend to look at high contrast, you tend to look at edges, right? You look at the obvious. What your prefrontal cortex empowers you to do is to look away from the obvious. And in this case, look away from the voice. I call it the voice. Now, you all know this voice because we all have this voice. It's this evolved voice inside our brains. How many of you go exercising of one capacity or another? You probably hear this voice just before you go. You've got up, you've got your shoes on, whatever. And it's like, oh, you know what? It's a bit late. I don't know if I'm a bit hungry. I'm a bit sore. You start giving all kinds of reasons why you shouldn't do it. That's your voice. Now, that voice is actually a good idea Because again, you're evolved in a world, you see a world through your evolved ancestors. And during evolution, spending energy, excess energy, was a bad idea. You don't see a chimp go for a jog, right? The others would be like, what are you doing? We're eating lettuce, right? You're going to expend all that energy. A cheetah, if you go on safari in Africa, you see a cheetah, it's like, that's really interesting. It's asleep. It's lying still for 22 hours of the day. Why? Because she only gets 5 goes to catch her prey. If she doesn't catch it on the 5th go, she's dead. To conserve energy is a brilliant idea. And yet, almost everything that is good for us costs energy, including thinking. And to respond better, to be better, costs energy. So in that moment of change, of doing something, your brain will have that voice that says, you know what, let's continue. Maybe it'll work again this time. Maybe we won't change. Maybe we'll get someone else to change. Maybe we'll blame someone else. And engaging that prefrontal cortex is a practice, right? I don't believe in this separation between brain and body. I hear it all the time. It is completely artificial distinction. Your brain is your body. It is just another organ, just like your muscle. You use it or you lose it, right? You go to the gym. How many of you go to the gym once and say, brilliant, I'm sorted for the rest of my life? That was great. I just had to do that lifting once, right? Why do we treat our brain differently? Okay? We have to practice. It's an exercise. You do this every single day. In fact, what I'm telling you today, you do every moment of every day, which is why changing well not only requires curiosity, it requires commitment. Third, that people and cultures that understand that it can actually have not only influence, but it can direct. The problem is, to change well often is a risk. Responding better is a risk, right? Why? Because the best things in life literally do not make sense. I'll come to that in a moment, right? We perceive what we perceived before. I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to put you into a moment of delusion, okay? I want you to tell me if you hear anything interesting in this sound stream. Hear anything interesting? No? Try reading along. Are you hearing it? Are you getting better at hearing it? Notice you're getting better at hearing something that doesn't actually exist. You're becoming delusional. Because you're hearing literally what I suggested you to hear. What is that sound? It's this played backwards.
Another one bites the dust. Another one bites the dust.
Right?
Ow!
We hear what we heard before, right? So to change requires stepping away from the obvious. Stepping away from what worked yesterday will work tomorrow. Because again, the best things in life literally do not make sense. What makes sense is literally normal. It literally makes sense. Like, oh, I understand that. That's what we do here. To not do that, to not do the average, is to respond better, right? But there is a risk, because our brain is also incredibly social. We have a tremendous fear. We have a tremendous need not only of closure, but of not being excommunicated. To not be part of a group during evolution meant death. Social is not an option. You literally, your systems could not, you can't do it alone. You can't go over and get the materials and then carry them in your arms and then, put it all together and hand it over. Right? We need a system. We need each other. To not be part of a group is literally death. Wild dogs, when another dog misbehaves, they don't kill the dog. They just excommunicate it. They ignore it. And the dog will follow along about a kilometer behind the rest of the tribe, and eventually it will just die. Because it can't survive on its own. We are no different. It's one of the biggest challenges of social media right now, the fear of excommunication for young people. What they are facing is an existential threat that is artificial, right? So we have this tremendous fear of excommunicating, right? So changing well requires commitment, curiosity, but also courage. to do something different from the way you do it before, with the possibility of retribution, with the possibility of being excommunicated. 4 is that understanding perception changes everything. Why? Because perception underpins everything it is to be you. What you think, what you know, what you believe, the clothes you wear, the people you fall in love with, everything begins with perception. I'm a perceptual neuroscientist. To understand perception is not only understand how the brain works, to understand what it is to be human, is to understand what it is to be that human or this human. Right? Everything begins with perception. So if you can understand why you or another person sees what you do, creates the possibility of actually seeing different. Because again, you don't have a choice until you know you have one. So again, do you see reality? Right? Well, instead, your brain did not evolve to see the reality. There is a world there. This is not postmodern relativism. Right? But the world doesn't come with instructions. It doesn't tell you what to do. So instead, your brain evolved to see a meaning that was useful to see in the past. And I'll give you an example. We're going to be in like a classroom. I want you to read what you see, and we'll do it all together. We're going to in the next few slides, we're going to read what we see. Okay? Ready? 1, 2, 3. Very good. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Very good, very good. 1, 2, 3. What are you reading? Remember the instructions class. I said, read what you see. You all failed, right? There are no words there. That literally says, what are you reading? Right? There's no law of physics that tells you to put an H between the W and A. Why did you do so? Because your brain has actually encoded the statistics of co-occurring letters in the English and other languages. So when you're presented with a completely artificial code, remember, language doesn't exist if we're not here. This is not physics. You put an H there because it was useful to do so in the past, so you do so again. Right? During World War II, it's why the Americans actually translated their messages into Navajo before they then coded them, because the Germans would assume the statistics of the English language. So they were unable to decode them because the statistics in Navajo is different. And none of you read, What Are You Dreaming? Why? Because I had you reading. So you read it according to your recent experience. And what's true for language is true at the most fundamental levels of perception, like color. So here you see a dark brown tile at the top and a light orange tile at the side. That is your perceptual reality. You would bet your life that they are different. When in fact, they are exactly the same. Nothing is changing on the screen. What you're seeing is the meaning of the information, not the information. That is your physical reality, and that is your perceptual reality. You're seeing the meaning of the information, not the data. Data is meaningless. How many of you work with big data? Which makes you essential. Data is useful, but not meaningful. Your brain creates the meaning, and it's the meaning that we respond to. And your brain does it by encoding your past assumptions, your past biases. Now, there's all kinds of conversation right now about biases and assumptions are bad. They're not bad. It's a silly idea. Right? You cannot live without biases and assumptions. Every time I take a step, I have assumptions that the stage is not going to give way, my leg. How many of you checked your chair before you sat down? Right? Did you? How many checked the blueprints of this building? Or the credentials of the taxi driver? Or had someone else taste the food? Right? It's amazing how much trust we literally put our lives in other people's hands hundreds of times a day, and we're not even aware of it. We literally could not move without assumptions and biases. If you had to check every single step, you couldn't move. And we're not the only one. Right? Here we have a cat eating away, turns around. Right? What's going on? It's just a cucumber. Right? Because if you mistake a cucumber for a snake, it's not a big deal. But if you mistake a snake for a cucumber, it is a big deal. Right? So we've all come into the world literally afraid of snakes. Why? Because you don't get to do empiricism with a snake. You get to do it once. So better to come in with a fear of them. We have assumptions that light comes from above. We have all kinds of these assumptions and biases that keep us alive, right? And what's more, these assumptions and biases don't stay just within you, right? You project them out into the world. There is no color on this screen. This shirt is not black. Agreed? No. The color couldn't be closer to you. It's inside your head, projected outward. You are literally coloring the world. Light exists, but it's not color. If the tree falls in the woods and no one's there to hear it, does it make a sound? No. It creates energy. The sound is a function of your brain. Okay? So we project these meanings onto the world. Here we have two triangles in a circle. And now you're going to project a meaning onto them. And you can't help but do so. You hate that big triangle. And you're feeling bad for the little guy. Right? And now you're worried for the circle. This is a horror film. You can almost hear the soundtrack, right? And we're going to stop it there. And you're all wondering, what happens to the circle? And the answer is nothing. It was a circle. Right? You projected the meaning onto it. In fact, everything I'm saying to you right now is literally meaningless. Right? You're creating the meaning and you're projecting it onto me. Every personality of another person you've ever perceived is actually inside you, projected outward. You color other people. And you color them just like the screen. You color them according to your assumptions, your bias, right? Your history. So when you're in a meeting, when you're meeting other people, you are coloring them. You are creating a meaning of them based on your assumptions and biases, which means that when it comes to perception, we are just like this frog. And I don't mean we are metaphorically like this frog. We are literally like this frog. And remember, perception underpins everything it is to be you. Right? Getting information, which is useful, but generating behavior according to past experience and doing quite well. We are so like that frog. When things don't go quite away, we get a bit annoyed, none of which even existed in the first place. Right? So assumptions and biases are essential for your survival. The challenge is that they can also constrain you. Right? It's knowing that you have them, which is essential. Because knowing that gives you humility. And the source of creativity is humility, is that not knowing. And they can also block you. And so if you know what they are, you can actually then question them and decide, is this one I want to have? Is this serving? Is this serving my team? In Britain, we have 2 taps. Okay? Do you have 2 taps here, a hot water tap and a cold water tap? What a stupid idea. Right? You burn your hands under one, and then you cool them off under the other. Why do we have 2 taps? Does anyone know why we have 2 taps? No? Because way back when, your hot water tank was basically an open bathtub in the loft. So mouse droppings would get into it, dust would get in it. It was a bad idea to drink the hot water. So they separated the hot water from the cold. A good idea back then. We no longer have open bathtubs in the loft. We have hot water tanks. It's no longer dangerous to drink the hot water. But people are still designing because they're doing what they did before, without questioning, without understanding. They know they don't understand. So understanding your assumptions gives you agency over them. There might be a good reason to have 2 taps. I'm not saying it's bad, but usually we're doing it not because we understand. So changing your assumptions can also change what you see, right? So here we have a wireframe diamond. Now we come into the world assuming that we look down on the surface, right? Because we evolved in a ground plane. So that's why you're probably looking at this diamond, seeing that central surface as if you're on top of it. So you'll see it spinning from left to right. I now want you to change your assumption. I want you to imagine you're looking up at it. And suddenly it will go in the opposite direction. Sometimes it helps to blur your eyes, look through your eyelashes, and blink and look around it. And suddenly it will flip. How many can get it to flip? And every time you blink, it'll go in the opposite direction. Nothing is changing. The only thing that's changing are your assumptions of whether you're looking up at it or looking down at it. and it changes everything you see. You're switching between two mutually exclusive perceptions based on your assumptions, which require completely different behavior. I wonder which direction is actually rotating. How many people say to the left? How many people say to the right? How many people, I don't care? What if I tell you it's not moving at all? It's not actually, right? You're looking at animation. And animation is nothing but a series of still images. Your brain is seeing the meaning of the change, not the change. If I put those images in random order, you just see flickering. So changing what you see will change what you do. So changing well requires curiosity, commitment, courage, and creativity. Creativity to change your perception. So when can you apply this? When can you apply it? We just have 10 minutes left, so let's just figure out when can we apply this. And the answer is when can we apply our curiosity, commitment, courage, and creativity to get resilience? And it's in the times that matter. When are the times that matter? Conflict. Conflict is the most essential time where you actually create understanding. And I define contact as to be in a situation that's different from what you expect. You're in conflict. That could be with yourself, with another person, with nature, with your systems, with your suppliers. Now, we've been taught that if we're in conflict, if you and I are in conflict, what's your name? Jeff. If Jeff and I are in conflict, we've been taught, and in fact, we've evolved to try to not move. So if he and I are in conflict, it's as if we're on opposite ends of the same rope. And I'm trying to prove him wrong and pull him towards me. He's trying to do exactly the opposite, prove that I'm wrong and pull me towards him. So notice that we set up conflict to win, but not learn. Because you literally only learn when you move. You never learn by standing still, by definition. Okay? So we enter conflict with certainty, with answers, in order to stand still. We seek to convince and to be validated. How can I validate someone if I don't even understand them? Right? And then when no one wants to, if Jeff and I don't want to move, then we get conflict resolution. Consultants to say, well, Jeff doesn't want to move, Beau doesn't move. What are we going to do now? Well, okay, we're going to get those four, because now we're at 4 horsemen. There's a psychologist at the University of Washington who can predict whether or not a couple will stay together to an average of 80%, to the extent they engage in these 4 horsemen in the moment of conflict. What are they? Criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, and ridicule. Ridicule being the most significant. Because now I'm trying to belittle Jeff in order to get him. I'm no longer even talking about this. Now we get the conflict resolution people. Now notice conflict resolution is really about trying to just keep your heart rate low. Right? Not a bad idea. And by the way, if you're ever in conflict with your partner, your kids, whatever, your supplier, and your heart rate gets above 90 beats per minute, stop. Because you're no longer listening. And you will shout about how much you're listening. Right? But you're not. Let your heart come down. Because you don't want to move. That's why you're there. It's not about the conflict. It's about you not wanting to move. Okay? So what you get is compromise and consensus and the low heart rate. Not bad ideas, but they don't actually achieve understanding. And yet conflict is the only place where you can learn. The only place where you can get understanding. To step into uncertainty, to step into not A. The problem is not conflict, the problem is how you enter it in the first place. If you enter it with the desire to stand still, to be certain, or with the desire to move. And a certain brain, an insecure brain, a fragile brain, will actually enter conflict with a fixed position. I want to stay still. Whereas a resilient brain enters conflict to move. I want conflict. In my lab, in my company, right? We want to move. We love conflict. We foster conflict. But we engage with it in the desire to understand. I don't care who creates that understanding. I want understanding to be created. And I know it can only happen in the moment of conflict. But we love it. We seek it out. We enter conflict. Next time you're in a conflict with whomever it is, this is your practice, enter it with a question rather than an answer. And I don't mean I was right, wasn't I? Right? Enter it with a question that actually seeks understanding. And ask questions like, Not where and when, which are data-driven questions, but why and what if. Because why and what if are trying to seek principles, not rules. Rules are efficient. They're important. But remember, innovation is both has principles and rules. So ask why and what if, and then iterate to better questions. Science is nothing other than iterating not to answers, but to better and better questions. Because asking a great question is hard. And creating a culture of resilience, because that's what you need. If you want your supply chains, et cetera, to be adaptable, be resilient, you need a culture that creates. And that culture begins with you. I call it the host. How many of you have gone to dinner parties, right? Of course, probably all of you. Have you noticed that the personality of the party is very much the personality of the host? If the host is quiet, the whole party is quiet. If the host is exuberant, the whole party is exuberant. Right? It's one of the reasons why this is a wonderful situation, because Amy is your host. She's exuberant. She infects you with her personality. And it's because our brains are contagious. We contagious other people. We infect others and are infected. Laughter is infectious by 3 people. So if Jeff and I were holding 2 glasses, we're going to interview someone, right? And I give him a sort of a glass of ice water. And then, Amy comes in. He's never met Amy before. And then we have a conversation. Maybe it's a job interview. And then Amy leaves. And I say, so Jeff, what do you think of Amy? He's more likely to give me cold words than had I given him a warm cup of coffee, where he'd be more likely to give me warm words. You have no idea this is happening to you. You are, as leaders, are that warm cup of coffee. You infect your culture through your own personality, your own way of being. Right? Great leaders lead by examples. This is because you infect other people. So your way of being creates the culture of resilience. It's a huge responsibility, but it begins with you. This is not a practice that you do when you walk through the door of your office. This is how you live your life with your partner, with your children, because you're not going to do it there, you're not going to do it anywhere else. So I'm going to give you 2 examples of leadership. And as we're finishing, here's one.
Oh, sweetie. Someone's got you.
Supportive.
Come on.
Leading by example.
Ah, yay! You're almost down. Come on. Oh. Good girl. Yeah.
Here's the other one. I want you to notice, looks up for reassurance. Right there. What kind of leader are you? Right? And the answer is, you gotta be both. I don't want you to leave here, and if a bus is coming at you, think, oh, I wonder if I can see this in a different way. No! Get out of the way as fast as possible, right? Life is not about living on the edge, it's about living on the edge on average. Wisdom is knowing when to be on one side or the other. The problem is we live life as if everything's a bus coming at us. So we never take that opportunity to evolve. So to finish, just with a thought, if everything you do right now is grounded in your history, and in particularly the histories of how you responded to stuff, then how you respond now will literally change your future path. How you choose to respond now will literally change your future perceptual reflex. So you have that ability to change the future by re-meaning the past and responding to the present. So thank you very much. I hope that was useful.
Wow. I do. All right, everyone knows less. That's good, and we understand more. That was phenomenal. Another hand for Dr. Beau Lotto. Extremely thought-provoking, but very applicable advice and really insight. So thank you for that. We're going to have a short break now, and then we're going to move into our peer groups. inside the app, if you click on the peer group time slot, it'll show you all the rooms where your different peer groups are at. And then we're going to come back in here for another session. So break, peer groups, and then another session back in here. Thank you.